One morning, surfer Samuka goes out to sea near São Paulo. He enjoys the wonderful weather when he sees an ice mountain ahead, brought by the current to the shores of Brazil. The guy swims towards the unusual phenomenon, and rescuers are also rushing there. But Samuka gets to the mountain first and is astonished to see people frozen in the ice block. The guy's attention is drawn to a young, beautiful girl. Suddenly the ice begins to crumble, and the guy notices that the girl has freed herself from the icy captivity and is sinking to the bottom. Samuka dives after her and brings her to the surface. The couple is brought to the beach, where Samuka gives the girl artificial respiration, and suddenly she comes to life. She gets scared of the stranger and starts screaming. The local residents run to the cries for help. Meanwhile, the rest of the frozen are transported by helicopters to São Paulo. Samuka's friend Elmo arrives on the shore, concerned about the guy's disappearance. At this time, Samuka is explaining to the island's residents that he saved the girl, but she accuses him of harassment. Suddenly she remembers that her entire family drowned, along with the ship Albatross, off the coast of Patagonia. The local residents take the couple to their home. The girl introduces herself as Marocas, and Samuka tells them he is a professional athlete. The rest of the frozen are brought to the cryo laboratory and placed in separate oxygen chambers to gradually bring them back to life. At this time, the house owner on the island recognizes the guy. He is not only a famous athlete, but also a successful businessman and an environmental activist. Unfortunately, there is no phone in the house, and Samuka cannot contact his relatives. Meanwhile, Elmo sets off in a rented boat to inspect the nearby waters, while Samuka proves to the homeowners that the girl was indeed frozen. And Marocas has long fled and is now running along the shore, calling for her relatives. Then it starts to rain, and she walks along the road, mourning her family. But then a car catches up with her, from which a police officer gets out, and this so shocks Marocas that she faints. The appearing Samuka asks for help to take her to the hospital. Elmo's boat continues to patrol near the islands when he sees a boat with his friend and picks up the couple on board. Marocas is sent by helicopter to São Paulo. Samuka flies with her, and his friend Elmo tells his fiancée and Samuka's mother about it. Finally, Marocas falls into the hands of doctors who reassure Samuka with the news that the girl's life is safe, and the guy sits by her bed all night, admiring her beauty. Meanwhile, scientists find out that the clothing of the frozen was made by hand. Moreover, the people have no traces of vaccinations, and one of the men has scars on his back from beatings. All this indicates that the people were frozen in the century before last. At this time, Marocas opens her eyes, which Samuka, sleeping at her bed, immediately notices. He reminds her that he pulled her out of the water and asks Marocas not to move, as she was in an artificial coma, which the doctors put her in to protect her brain activity. But Marocas takes this as an insult because she does not consider herself a fool and does not understand the meaning of some modern words. In general, she demands to meet her family. Samuka calms her down by saying that all her relatives are alive. But then Marocas notices the hospital clothes she is wearing, and again becomes anxious, demanding to return her dress and take her to her father and mother. At that moment, a black doctor enters the ward and Marocas, due to racial prejudice typical of the time, asks him to find her father. But then a woman walks in, a psychiatrist, and manages to calm the woman a little. At this time, Don Machado, who is Marocas' father, opens his eyes and emerges from the oxygen chamber, which the duty doctor sees. He tries to stop the man, but he attacks the doctor, demanding his daughter back. Meanwhile, a cryo-freeze specialist examines the girl and lets Marocas listen to her heart. But even more surprising is the fact that the doctor is a woman scientist. Marocas is curious about the unusual hospital equipment and lamps and shares that doctors come to her family's home for medical visits. The doctors note Marocas' excellent Portuguese, and she talks about her teacher. Besides, she speaks French and is homeschooled, as only boys attend the lyceum. Moreover, she does not know what vaccinations are and has almost never been sick. The girl vividly remembers how their ship sank after colliding with an iceberg. The doctors tells the girl to rest, and Marocas assures them that she feels great, as though she has slept 100 years. She asks the head doctor to call horse-drawn carriage. The doctor does not tolerate being treated this way. He is not a servant. Marocas apologizes. It seems the man is of the freed folk. She too is against any forms of oppression. At this time, Don Machado finds his clothes and suddenly sees the rest of his family members. The man goes around each of them in turn and suddenly feels unwell. The medical staff call an ambulance, as there is no necessary equipment in the laboratory. Meanwhile, Samuka asks for permission to talk to Marocas alone, but she objects to this. After all, it's indecent. And sitting in her presence is also a sign of bad manners. At this time, Don Mashadu is brought to the hospital unconscious, and a female doctor is called to the girl's room to maintain propriety, and she agrees to listen to Samuka, not forgetting to reprimand him for his inappropriate appearance. She remembers her faithful maid, and seeing the guy's surprise, she mistakes him for an abolitionist. However, she is also categorically against slavery, but she asks not to tell her father about this, as he is a loyal servant of the king. Marocas assumes that Samuka is from the lower class of society, but this area of São Paulo belongs to her father, so the guy is clearly a minor and will be happy to receive land for planting from her father as a reward for saving her. Their conversation is interrupted by a psychiatrist who asks Marocas what year she thinks it is now. The girl confidently names the year, 1886. Only she won't name the date, as she doesn't know how many days she spent unconscious. After hearing everything, Samuka instructs his lawyer to find information about Don Machado's family, who lived near São Paulo 132 years ago, and he categorically refuses to hand the girl over to scientists for study, as she is a living person. The psychiatrist also confirms that the girl's cognitive brain functions are in complete order. While the doctors and Samuka argue about the further fate of Marocas, she finds her dress and leaves the room. But at the elevator, the guy catches up with her and agrees to take her to her family, but with one condition. He shows her photos of her relatives in cryo chambers and tells her about the freezing, after which he confesses that he considers her a miracle and, blindfolding her, leads her outside, puts her in a car, and drives her to his apartment. In the meantime, Don Machado comes to in the clinic, and his neighbor, a black worker, Eliseo, appears by his side and promises the man his help in the search for his family, although he does not understand why people look down on him as someone inferior. He helps Machado find clothes and leads him to the exit, although the thawed man is constantly distracted by the surrounding wonders of the modern world. Meanwhile, Samuka brings Marocas to his apartment, where she takes off the blindfold and looks around curiously. The guy offers the girl to take a bath, but then the question arises about who will help the girl with this delicate issue. Samuka calls his mother, while Don Machado is convinced that he has died and ended up in hell, as there are no horses anywhere, and the unknown carriages, which are modern cars, might hit him at any moment. The man is barely persuaded to get into a taxi. At this time, Carmen arrives at her son's house and meets Marocas, who can't believe that this young lady is Samuka's mother. The girl examines her jewelry with interest and happily accepts the woman's help, who escorts her to the bedroom. Meanwhile, Don Machado never tires of marveling at the electric lights, huge towers, and steam engines. Marocas also notices the built-in lights and praises Samuka, although she is surprised by some aspects of his upbringing. Carmen tells her that his father ran away and she raised her son alone. This puzzles Marocas. Usually such girls leave infants on the church doorstep and go to become nuns themselves. Carmen helps the girl take off her dress, after which Marocas goes to the shower and the warm water delights her. After everything, Carmen puts the tired girl to bed and then goes to her son. At this time, Don Machado arrives at Eliseo's apartment, and having noticed the electric bulbs, announces that he wants to meet his very influential guardian, because it is simply impossible that such people live in such lavish conditions. He walks around the small apartment, amazed at the running water from the faucet, and then sits on the toilet, enjoying its comfort. Eliseo's daughter takes him for a madman, but her father simply couldn't leave the poor man without help. Meanwhile, Carmen laughs at Samuka's stories, as believing in the possibility of freezing is just unreal. The girl is clearly insane. Meanwhile, Don Machado also succumbs to Eliseo's persuasion and lies down to sleep on the couch, and Samuka assures his mother that he would never allow Marocas to be turned into a lab rabbit. During the night, Samuka can't sleep, quietly sneaks into the bedroom where Marocas is sleeping and admires her. In the morning, the guy wakes up to a splash of water. The angry girl found him by the bed and splashed him with water from a glass. She trusted him, and he lay next to her all night. Carmen runs in at the scream and barely calms the enraged Marocas. They go to the living room, where Marocas sees a working coffee maker and instantly forgets Samuka's transgressions. Carmen admits she couldn't fully master it because she doesn't know English and couldn't read the instructions. Marocas asks to see them and immediately translates everything into Portuguese. The girl confesses that she knows several languages, and Carmen wonders where she came from. This question is echoed by Samuka's arriving fiancé, Betty, who doesn't like the girl's closeness to her fiancé. Marokas tries to explain that she didn't stay alone with Samuka, but Betty is very aggressive. Marokas asks not to insult her as Samuka enters the room. He also asks his fiancée not to make a scene for no reason, and agrees to take Marokas to her parents. But first, he wants to show her something. With these words, Samuka opens the windows, and the astonished Marokas sees a modern metropolis from a high viewpoint, and can't believe that this is São Paulo. And then, Samuka declares the current year to be 2023. Upset, Marokas quickly calculates that she has been frozen for over 100 years. Betty can no longer bear it, returns Samuka's engagement ring, and leaves. To distract the girl, Samuka turns on the television, and Marokas is literally stunned by the miracle she sees. Meanwhile, Don Machado and Eliseo go outside to search for his family. Back in Samuka's apartment, Marokas can't stop marveling at the wonders of modern technology. Amazed by the presence of electricity in homes, she then realizes that all her acquaintances have long since died. But the news that Brazil is now a republic and slavery has been abolished once again thrills her. However, right opposite Samuka's apartment window, a helicopter with journalists hovers, having finally found the frozen girl. They have to close the blinds, after which Marokas remembers her family again. At the same time, Don Machado also sees the helicopter, which thrills him. Samuka then puts Marokas in a car, now without a blindfold, and the girl is amazed by everything she sees. The asphalt, the flashing traffic light, and the advertising screens. Marokas is brought to the cryolaboratory, and she finally sees her relatives and close ones. She calls everyone by name, but then she discovers her father is not there. Meanwhile, he is infuriated that some machines don't give way to people and is keenly interested in how a motorcycle works. Later, Eliseo shows the man a newspaper with the publication date. This becomes a real shock for Machado. He rushes out onto the street, asking passersby for the date and their location, but everyone says the same thing. In the end, Machado is convinced of the truth of what happened, but his behavior arouses the suspicion of a police officer. Hearing that he is suspected of being drunk, Machado lunges at the officer with his fists. Marokas insists on searching for her father, and she and Samuka drive through the city streets. The traffic jams leave her puzzled and terrified. At the same time, the officer pulls out a gun, announcing Machado's arrest, which causes outrage among the bystanders. Just then, Samuka's car ends up on that street, and Marokas finally reunites with her father.